Welcome to Make Your Move, the podcast designed to help you get on the property ladder and then figure out what the hell you're doing once you're on there. From deposits to mortgages, surveys to moving day, we can help. Make Your Move is brought to you by Really Moving, the price comparison site for moving home services. Let's get into our episode. And welcome to the Make Your Move podcast. This week we are talking to Paula Higgins from the Homeowners Alliance, who is here to talk to us about the things you need to ask when you're viewing a property for the first time. Welcome, Paula.
Thank you.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about the Homeowners Alliance and your experience in the industry?
Of course. So Homeowners Alliance, we're a very popular property advice website. I set it up 10 years ago to give independent advice and services to buyers and sellers, because at that time it was very hard to get sort of basic answers to questions like how much should I pay an estate agent or how should I negotiate a property. So 10 years later, we have lots of really independent guidance that's being checked, and you can also come to our site to find things like compare conveyancing quotes, working with Really Moving and removals and that sort of lot.
The first question really is, when you book a viewing, is there any research you need to do beforehand, or you just crack on with it?
No, you definitely need to do research before booking a viewing. We are all very, very time poor, and you really don't want to be traipsing from place to place with looking at properties that are just not suitable and don't meet your needs, really. So the first thing I'd say is before you do your research, or as part of your research before you book a viewing, is really look at the property listing carefully. They're getting really much, much better. The floor plans are really important. And also to look at things like particularly if it's leasehold, if it's freehold, what the council's tax band is. And estate agents are being encouraged quite strongly to put more and more of this type of information up front so that you don't waste your time and going to view the property. There's also an awful lot you can find online. So you could find the last time the house had been sold or the property had been sold, at what price, what the neighbors are. You could see how long it takes to walk to the local shops or to take transport, to commute, the schools in the area, whether you'd actually get into the catchment area of the schools, are there any major planning developments planned? So there's a lot of things that you can find out online. And we really would say the more research you do, the better off you'll be in the end.
Yeah, I think it's funny when you think about it. Property is probably the most expensive thing you're ever going to buy. It's this huge purchase and a huge decision. And most people, I think it said on your website, it's about half an hour, the average time that people spend viewing, on an actual visit to a property, which seems mad.
Bonkers. Yes, it is quite bonkers, really. But I mean, that'll be like the first visit, really. So we did always encourage people to visit a few times. But it's really tricky, especially if you're a first-time buyer, you haven't done it before, you feel a bit awkward going into somebody else's home. You've got an estate agent, putting pressure on you, saying there's another viewers. And all of these are sales tactics anyways, but really do not be rushed when you are viewing a property, and do go back, because you need to go out back as many times as for you to get enough information that you feel comfortable putting in an offer. And actually it can be life-changingly good, but also if you get it wrong and if you find out that it's not the right place for you to live in, it can be also an very expensive mistake. So we do say is, you really need to take care and do your viewings properly, but also be time efficient with your viewings. So one of our tips would be, make sure write a list of things that you want to look at or things that you think you should look at before you go, and try to tick that off while you're there.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's so easy to I suppose you go in to get a feel for a place, right? You go in to see if it's a hard thing to try and get just from the photos on a listing. You want to get a feel for the place. And, sizes, I always think it's very hard to get a sense of space.
Oh, yeah. And of course, because of the way that they take the photos anyways, you've got to see whether they've, maybe they've taken the photos and they've taken all the furniture out of the room and there's no place for storage. And you also get a lot of things from viewing the property just from outside. So, if you're not you feel a bit pressured while you're inside, is look outside. The curb appeal is so important. Look at the windows. Do they look like in good condition? Is there paint peeling? Do they look a bit rotten? Look at the roof. Even if you don't know what to look for, but if you can see if there's moss growing up there, so it might be something you might want to say, actually, I might get a surveyor to look at that more carefully. So there's lots of little telltale signs you can take when you're viewing a property. But we say that, go in with a checklist. Try not to be ushered by these, where the estate agent wants to show you and their patter. Do make sure you see all the rooms, make sure that you look at the loft, you look at the, the basement, and also think what the potential is. Can you build out? I know that you're finances will be incredibly stretched at this time, but it'll be a surprise in a few couple of years. You might decide, actually, yes, I do need to extend, or maybe I need a garden room. So just really take your time and really visualize and see if you can see yourself living in that property.
Obviously, you mentioned the estate agent kind of having that sense of urgency and the pressure on you. Do you have any like tips? Because I think a lot of people, especially first-time buyers, might feel a bit intimidated to just go where the estate agent wants you to go and like just take the time that they want you to take. Do you have any tips for maximizing your time and trying to counteract them kind of pushing you in a certain way?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, always be polite. Estate agents are ultimately, they're on your side, but you've got to remember they're there for the seller. They're looking to maximize the price they want to sell the property, but they're also looking for the right buyer, really. So it is a good relation to cultivate. So just, ask questions, ask lots of questions, especially if you've got the owner there, which usually the estate agents will try to make sure the owner is not there. But make sure people love talking about their property, and people are generally fairly, trying to be fairly honest. So just ask lots of questions. Make sure you see every room and don't feel silly about it. Say, look, I'd like to see the loft, or, maybe see my parents said I should see this. Another good piece of advice is maybe bring a friend, because if you've got two people, then you can kind of both play good cop and bad cop, really. So, one can maybe go wander off into a bathroom and turn on the tap to see if see what the water pressure is like, while the other is with the estate agent. So it's always like, another pair of eyes can also really help. Another piece of advice we'd always give is also, if you've got time, like, if you're standing outside waiting for the estate agent to come in, if you can strike up a conversation with a neighbor, brilliant, because they'll know exactly what's going on in the neighborhood. And actually, they would like to know, you'd like to know how long, the house has been empty for a period of time. What are the schools like? Would you get your children into the school? What are the shops like? And you get a real sort of sense of the community in the area. And again, the neighbors will always, be fairly, we're fairly honest people, I think. I would say another good thing is, so you do feel a bit rushed with the estate agent. So a lot of the listings will have virtual viewings. So you can actually in your own time see, see viewings also, but also ask to take photos. You should ask permission first. And that might also help you that, when you go back and start to think about it, and maybe think about if you want to do another viewing, the things you've checked off on your list that you're happy with, or things that you're a bit concerned about and you want to explore a bit further.
Is there ever anything that you think, if you were looking at a property and you saw that, you'd go, nope, I'm out, absolutely not? Or is it just a case that there's a variety of there might be an issue, but you can throw money at a problem and that's fine? Or is there ever anything that you see on a walkthrough that you kind of go, no, I wouldn't touch that at all?
Oh, it really depends. It really depends on your propensity and your level of risk as well. Because, if it's a property that's very run down, you might think, well, actually, I could do it up and I will make money off, because people cannot be bothered doing it up. So I wouldn't shy away from decoration that's not suitable for you, or even if you've got some major work, if you feel that that's what you want to do. Especially also, you might be better to sort of buy big, or sort of to think about yourself in 3 or 4 years. What you don't want to do is to buy a property that you feel you've outgrown within a year, because that's where you're set to lose money in terms of all the transaction costs. So think about if you can see things going on, that you can see that you can probably improve or whatever. In terms of things that would really turn me off, I think it's actually more the legal side of it. I'd be very worried about things like lease length, for instance. And it's very likely, if you're buying a leasehold property and not having the right charges, if you can't get information about the costs and the ground rents, and how much the service charges are, I would be quite worried about that. And I'd also be worried about if it was an apartment building, if the whole out exterior, everything is dilapidated, and because that means it's not being managed properly. And I'd be worried that, for instance, that when the roof might be coming up to be replaced, there's going to be some big money that will be needed to do that, and you might not be prepared for that. So, but other than that, I think it's as long as if you get a survey, surveys can be great because they can help you decide how much money you want and you need to spend, that if it's, the roof needs repaired or whatever it is. The other thing I would say that, is also to look at things that can't be fixed. So, if you go in and you think, well, okay, it's a beautiful property, but it's by a major road and that's going to really annoy you and you're worried about the air pollution, then it's never going to change. Another thing to look at is if light is quite important. So, for instance, if you're a keen gardener and you want a south-facing garden and you've got a damp, derelict garden that will never do anything, and you probably will think, well, maybe I will never be happy there. I'd rather look somewhere else and look at the where the property is located and how it's located. So it's those types of big things that would put you off. And sometimes that sort of stuff you can see before you're even going to view the property, whether it's close to a big A road or whatnot. So, and that's where to do your research carefully.
So when going for the actual viewing, what are the main things to be looking at when you go for a viewing, the things that people often miss or people don't know to look out for?
Yeah, so I think the big thing to do is to go in with your checklist. So literally write out, even if you might not hold it to hand or whatever it is, but that will sort of keep it in your brain that you've got to look at things like look at the windows, look at the double glazing. Is there condensation? Windows are incredibly hard to replace. Well, not incredibly hard, but expensive to replace, and they can be quite cold. Look at the roof. Ask to see the boiler. How old is the boiler? Look at where the radiators are. There rooms without any radiators? Do you think it's going to be cold? Look at its cracks. So it might be sort of minor cracks, might be absolutely fine, but if they're major cracks, you might be quite worried. Smell, have a smell. Have they got lots of candles around? Maybe you're worried about damp. So these types of big sort of issues like damp, subsidence and stuff that can be quite tricky. So it's looking at look at the size of the rooms. Are the rooms they'll be suitable enough for the way that you want to live in that? Of course, you can kind of chop and change, but ultimately the size of the property, if it's not going to suit you, look in cupboards, try out the tap if you can. So just hold back and just really try to look at beyond the sort of the initial decoration and see if you can visualize that you're there. Look at the garden, look outside. One thing I would also say that I'd always be quite wary about, if a certain room has been painted and others haven't, what are they hiding? Look at things like if you can see underneath the carpets or the rugs or whatever. A rug might be sitting there but it would be sort of strategically placed, for instance, because it's hiding something, or sort of big tapestries on the wall. So just think about like where you might hide your warts and all, really.
I think one of the best things someone said to me was about visiting at different times of day. So for things like seeing the traffic or what it's like at night, if it's very different, if it feels less safe. But yeah, different, like traffic at different times.
Yeah, it seems like a no-brainer,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, it seems like a no-brainer, but yeah, definitely. And it's very classic that people, the estate agent will say, oh, it only take you so many minutes to, your commute or travel or whatever it is, into town. But go and do it at that time of day. Don't go and do it at 8 o'clock in the morning. See what it's like. If it's near a school, go during school time. You might find out you can't get any parking at all, and maybe that's an important thing. It's really important also because one of the things is, especially if you're feeling unsafe at night, or if there's a pub that maybe is wild at night, or maybe it's not at all. You don't know. It can go either way, really. So it is really important that, especially, and we'd always say that definitely most people will do at least two viewings before putting in an offer. Or, if you put in an offer and do a viewing, is go at a different time of day, purposely go at a different time of day. And, again, it's always good to bring a friend just to, get another pair of eyes on it. Sometimes people fall in love with the property in their heart, but you need to take a step back and think with your head, like, can you imagine living there day in, day out, and for you to do the things that are important for you, the journeys that you need to do?
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And I think it also sometimes, you set a scene. If you go on a lovely sunny day and everything seems beautiful and whatever, and then actually, I remember viewing a property with my mum when she was looking for a new place, and it was a beautiful house, and we'd walked past it many times, and it was lovely. And we went to see it in the rain, and you suddenly realised the full extent of the damp in the rain because it was just so cold and wet. And looking at these windows and just going, oh, on the outside every day when we'd walk past in the sun, you'd go, oh, that's lovely. And then you go, oh, no,
Yeah.
this is not
Yeah.
great.
And estate agents know this as well. So, they'll give you bookings for 11 o'clock or whatever it is. But if you can go at night, it's a time, and it's especially we talk about the aspect of the house, right? That, it's amazing. And one side of the street from another, it can feel like a very dark house during the day or maybe in the evening. And that's where I think getting out into the garden is really important as well. If there is a garden, or if there's a place, an outdoor space that's quite important for you, it is important to visit it at all times, because you'll be living there at all times of the day.
So I think another way that people try and influence how the house feels is staging. Can you take us through a little bit what that is and what it's used for in terms of viewing?
Sure. So staging is when you go and you you're putting your property in the best light, and this can be, actually the owners of the property taking all their furniture out completely, putting it into storage. And there's also lots of lovely tricks, and they're just really trying to sort of make the property that you can see yourself living in. And that usually will end up costing more as well, because it can be a very sound investment for someone who's trying to sell. So some of the things that you can see for staging is mirrors are a very classic example. So cleverly placed mirrors to sort of expand out the property, or even mirrors in the garden, which can be a very effective way to expand out the property. But just be aware of what's happening. Minimal furniture. New build developers are classic at this. So they literally will put in extra small look like double beds, or you might find out in the bedroom that there's no side tables. So really look at where the storage furniture is. This is very classic to take out the chest of drawers or the cupboards or things like that. So that's another area where staging that's a very classic thing to do. Strategic lighting. So we talked earlier about how light is really important, and that's lovely smells. So, we hear about the baking bread, or, the nice candles, and that can really mask the smell of damp, and maybe other smells that, you don't want to have. And the other staging is that, and what I said earlier is that, really look at where, if everything's been painted, quickly and properly, and especially if certain areas are looking a bit more well done or painted than others, I'd be really quite wary of that. And why have they painted that? So it can be a nice way for you to see a property that you love, but you might actually be paying a premium for properties that are staged. So, what we always say is, you go into properties that are a bit tired, maybe try to sort of put your staging hat on and see, don't be scared if it's, if somebody hasn't staged, but, it's a classic example with people in properties. They've kind of fallen in love. They just want to move on. But, actually don't be scared off of that. You need to give everything a lick of paint. That's actually not that expensive. And it's quite fun being and buying properties where you can put your own stamp of uniqueness on it, instead of feeling that you don't really want to repaint or to tear things out that are already new. And it seems quite inefficient to do so.
If you have furniture that you're going to move into the house, is it worth having measurements and stuff in your head and being able to kind of gauge where it would all fit in a house?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great, and I'm terrible at visualizing. And I know the first thing you should look at, and I think we said this at the beginning, is look at those floor plans. But the floor plans are not all the same, because they actually don't have the same way of measuring. So sometimes the estate agents will give the floor plan, but they'll include the thickness of the walls. What I've been known to do is actually just taking a tape measure out, so even where I am, to try to visualize how big that room is, because you might find out it's a little bit of a box room. But do think to see whether your furnitures, would it fit into your new property? Will you be able to get it in? Will you be able to get your, if you've got a lovely big massive sofa, will you get it in through your front door? We recently did did some changes to our basement, and we found out that actually there's only one sofa we could buy that can actually get in there. So God forbid the next person who buys it, they'll realize that they're not going to be able to get to a pool table or a big TV or something like that into these tiny rooms. So looking at the location of how things fit together is always very wise to do so. But yeah.
Yeah, thinking about staging, it reminds me kind of the reverse of staging. When I was looking at flats, there was one room we went in and they had an absolutely massive bed in there, and it just made the room feel really small. And it really turned me off that flat, because I just thought there's not going to be any space. But if they'd had a really strategically small bed, I might not have even noticed how small the room was.
Yeah.
So I can see how that would work on people.
Yeah, so it is. I mean, and that's where, so that's why don't be scared off, because actually, the property that we bought was empty for a long, long time, and people were very scared off, and it needed quite a bit of work or whatever it is. And we spoke to the neighbors as to why was this property empty? We're really concerned about this. We want to make an offer. And it sort of transpired that actually the owner of the property was living elsewhere, was quite not a very nasty person, and kept sort of, pushing up prices and this and that. So it's really interesting to understand the history of the property, and to visualize what, we could visualize beyond the net curtains and the awful beige carpets and actually it might be quite popular now, or the way it was all done. It was very quite naff, and it wasn't to our taste. But over time, you start to, then it becomes your own, and then you can put your own stamp of approval on it. So purposely, I would purposely pick a property where I could do some work on it, as opposed to something that is actually perfect, to move into. But it's people's own choices, and it's what is works for you. So, and that's why it's really good to do a checklist or something, so to remind yourself of what is it that's important to you. Is it the location? Is it that to make sure you've got rooms set aside for if you need to have a work from home or a playroom, or do you want an open plan kitchen? If it's not an open plan kitchen, surprisingly enough, it's actually not too bad to tear down sometimes an internal wall. So don't be scared by that. And doing that, actually, you could probably add quite a lot of value to your home, because the next people who are looking to buy might want that open plan kitchen. So it can be, you can actually spend to make more in the long run.
Yeah, I think there's like looking past the staging and sort of seeing it as your own, and then I'm not a visualizing person. I'm not very good at seeing. My husband's luckily quite good at that, but I haven't got the ability to like imagine a different color on the wall or anything like that. But you just kind of have to
I'm
go
the
with it
same.
first.
I'm the same.
But then, like you say, there's also the imagining yourself living there, and yeah, I think every time we've got a list on Really Moving as well, a checklist that you can kind of print out, and every time I think, yeah, water pressure, you said it. Like, I would never have thought to run a tap or run the shower, stink off and run the shower, or just to see. But that is something that would really impact your day-to-day life if it's rubbish. The same as, natural light and,
Yeah.
and access to things, or if you're, if you can't leave your house.
Or mobile phone coverage.
Yes. And yeah,
Mobile phone
internet.
coverage is really important.
Mm.
Broadband, and this stuff will be coming online that, on Rightmove and others, you can see what the broadband levels of services are, or the mobile phone, but nothing beats going into the house with your phone, doing your viewing and seeing, does this work? Or talking to your neighbor, and they might say, well, this provider is not very good in this area, but this provider is really. So it's those types of things that are really, really important to people, really. And that's where, to have that sort of little list behind, you've got in your head that you can tick off before you actually think, well, actually, this is, I can really see myself living here for for at least a few years.
That's the one thing I wish I had checked off when I viewed where I currently live, because we went to set up our internet the first day we moved in, and we realized that the people who lived here previously, or whoever, had painted over the socket for where you put the internet in. So we had to have them come in and like put a new one in the wall. So for about a week of living here, we didn't have any internet because there was no way to connect it. And if we'd looked at that before, we might have made a different choice. But obviously, luckily, things turned out.
Yeah, because that's a good point, because things like electrics are really important. Like looking to see where the plug points are. They can be an absolute nightmare if you're in a place and, you've got all the tech that you want to use and you only have a few plug points. And, and rewiring can be a very expensive business, which is why it's always good to, wherever you move to, is to get a survey done of some sort, or, make sure that you're happy with taking that risk on of doing the work yourself.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of the next point, is that, yeah, again, heart head, maybe you love it, but you've noticed there are a few issues. The next step would be to get a survey and sort of confirm if there are issues.
Yeah, and surveys are, I mean, they can be very different from what people think about. We know that there's like, the RICS level 1, 2, 3, but they can also be sort of bespoke to you. So I think what we always say and what we have on our site is like, how do you find a surveyor? But, they're working for you. So we always say, don't go for the one that maybe is being offered by the mortgage lender or whatever. But, this is a building professional that is there for you. So make sure that, you see what kind of report they're going to give. They can be very different. So some will do lots and lots of photos. They'll take the photos of the roof and all that sort of stuff. But also make sure that you ask, if you're worried about a certain crack or you're worried about something, ask them that. And if you can, go and visit them if you're allowed to while they're there or at the end of their survey, so they can point out to you. We bought a property years ago and it was in terrible condition. Spent a lot, on the survey, and got a sort of program of works out of him to say, okay, I know I need to do all this stuff. And at the end, I was like, do you think we should still buy this property? And it had damp and all these different things. And he said, actually, I think it's quite a good deal because it's in a good location. It's fundamentally good location, fundamentally good transport links. And you make it your home, and it'll work over time. So we were happy to take that risk on, which is why we got probably a very good deal in the end. But I did invest in that survey, and I invested in the surveyor. So I made sure I did my research. I spoke to various surveyors before I settled on somebody who really understood the local area as well, and sort of understood, like, had seen other properties in the area and what had been done there. So I think that gave me a lot of reassurance.
I was thinking as well, in some ways, the people, if the owners are there, or if the estate agents can tell you a little bit about the owners, you are buying their home, you're buying their history to an extent. So sometimes that can give you a little bit of an insight. So, for example, my mum was trying to buy this bungalow, and it went on and on for a very long time trying to buy this bungalow from a lovely little old couple who'd been there for about 35 years. And the guy was very much that he wanted to fix everything himself and he would look after it and whatever. But actually, you realize when you've been there for so long and you're older and you can't perhaps keep up with it the way you would have liked, when the surveyor went in, he just went, oh, I'm not like, for a single older lady buying by yourself, like, this is going to be years worth of work that they've tacked on bits here, or they've tried to plug this up there, or they've tried to make do and mend, and actually it's worse off because they didn't do it earlier and didn't do it properly. And I think you kind of find, there's been other houses where we saw where, the guy went, oh yeah, I know a builder mate and we've kind of dealt with it. And you go, oh, where's the paperwork? Like,
Yeah.
So I really feel like you're buying their home, you're buying their history of how they've looked after their home as well.
Yeah, which can be quite dangerous. But I would say that I thought you're going to go down the route that, people quite, thinking, oh, well, a seller, like, I'm going to buy their home and I'm going to get a nice price for it, whatever. And unfortunately, that doesn't seem to happen because they're trying to buy the next home. But we always encourage, estate agents really hate this, but we always encourage, if you can, to, try to have a relationship with the seller, because for a lot of people, if they understand your story, and we know that 1 in 3 property transactions fall through, and there's lots of whispers and lots of, things happening. But if you've got a direct relationship with that buyer, that seller, it does make things a little bit easier, really. And that's why also that, when we bought our home, we knocked on the door of the neighbor and started chatting to her and thought, okay, is this interesting? This is an interesting house. Why is this? And that's, it's so much insight. So don't be so English about it. And, just go and do your research and chat to people, chat to the local neighborhood. And, yeah, but in the case of this, like, yeah, the bungalow, that's very classic. That, and and also, if you don't have the paperwork, everything takes a lot longer as well, really. So, which is why, again, another thing, which I'm sure Really Moving say the same thing, is like making sure you get a conveyancer on day one, and the likes of making sure that you get the legal work done properly, and that you actually read and speak to your conveyancer about any issues you may have and any red flags they give. Is just listen quite carefully. And we see people going full speed ahead saying that's it, that's the only house, and perhaps maybe it falls through, then 6 months later they're so happy it's fallen through. And also the other thing is that it's very classic that maybe not so much at the moment now, it's more of a buyer's market, but people are absolutely gutted to miss out on a house. They're looking for a certain house in the area, but many times it can actually, that buyer could have fallen through, and then they'll come back to you and say, oh, you still interested in it. So there's different houses for different sorts, and I think we all adapt to things, and we're probably quite happy with where we end up and not think about the what ifs. What if I didn't got that house, or didn't get that house, or property, or that?
Oh yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of, I definitely, one of ours fell through and I was so grateful because it then transpired that it had so many issues. And I think that probably happens to a lot of people. But I thought it was interesting saying that, we do try and, we want things to be quicker. We want them to be sort of automated a little bit more. But actually, so much of the buying process is a bit more personable. It's calling and speaking to your conveyancer. It's calling and speaking to your estate agent and checking in.
Yeah.
And if you'd spoken to that neighbor and she was absolutely horrible, it might have changed your mind about whether you wanted to buy that house.
Yeah, no, neighbors can be a nightmare, really. So, and that could be an easily a way thing to move. But it's a pity, because I think that if we had more, and we're campaigning to have more upfront information, and that's why it's great. We've got so much more online. Is that you want to have, and one of the first questions you asked is like, what research you do before doing a viewing? Lots, because then actually, this doesn't meet my top 3 criteria, or my top 3, that these are really important, then that's it. Okay, you can move on, really. So it's just really important to do your research and to really think in your head, what is important to you? And it's probably likely that you're going to have to do some trade-offs, because we're not all made of money. And, I'm sure we'd all love to live in Buckingham Palace or someplace, but, you might have to make that trade-off and move that bit further out, or think a bit outside the box, really. Maybe you need to have a flatmate for a while. We've done that in the past, or something that's maybe not quite, you can see there's room to expand and to do up and do things over time. So yeah, so you just really need to be a bit more sort of adaptable, really. It's not like buying a sofa or even a car. And it's also very much, I think it's the important thing is buyers beware, really. So it is, you get what you buy and you generally can't return it. And if you feel you've been missold, it's incredibly hard to make that case. You might get a few £100 in compensation, but if you miss that conveyancer told you about that big planning development of, a gazillion houses that's going over your green field that you wanted to buy, but they showed it to you and you weren't paying attention, that's it. You're stuck with that. So yeah, I guess that's why we like all our property TV shows, really, isn't it?
So yeah, we've talked about all the research you need to do, like before and during the viewing. But after you've viewed a property, you really love it, and you've checked off all the things you needed to view. Is there still research you should continue doing after you've chosen somewhere?
Well, I think if you put in your offer and you're feeling quite comfortable, and you have to think that the price you're paying is the price that you're happy with, really. So, I always think that, properties or homes should be for living in, and, don't think that you're going to make so much money or whatever it is. But I think that it's really important to get the legals right. So I think that's where, if you find out that you found your perfect property, but then you find out later down the line, or you didn't pay attention, that there's restrictions on it, for instance, maybe it's in a conservation area, maybe you won't be able to make those changes, or that there's the parking, you're not going to be able to park outside. So there's those types of restrictions, or that you might not be able to operate a business out of your home, or keep your caravan outside, or something like that. So I think those types of things are really, really important to keep an eye out, and some of that stuff won't come out till down the line. Another area that people don't think about, and this sometimes because estate agents might not know, the boundaries. So you think you've bought that, section of land as well, and you haven't. And now you're in a boundary dispute, which, was not the best way to start off getting on with your neighbors. So it's those types of things that is really, really important to look at the searches. Flooding is another example. And there's so much open data now on that you can find. And also the conveyancer, a good conveyancer will help you with that as well.
So finally, what is your one best tip for people viewing a property?
I would say my biggest tip, what I say over and over again, is when you're viewing a property is bring that checklist with you, because it's amazing how it's so annoying that you might have traveled somewhere, you've gone in, you think, actually, I'm really, really interested in this, but I haven't looked at X, Y, and Z, and of course you can go back and this and that, but just bring that checklist with you and just, tick off. Is there storage? What's the aspect of the garden? Look around with really sort of intelligent eyes, really. And yeah, no, it's a very exciting time.
So what's the one thing you learnt from our expert guest this week?
I think the biggest thing I learned was the amount of trickery that could be involved with viewing a house. Is the way of like, paint cannot conceal something, a well-placed mirror. I think often we just get into the idea that this is exactly what the house is like, and sometimes we miss the fact that they're trying to make their house look as nice as possible. So maybe be a little bit skeptic of when you're looking at it.
Yeah. In a similar way, I think I very much fall for like the atmosphere of something and the feel of a place. But actually, like you say, the feel of a place is just staging a lot of the time. They've made it feel that way. And I could make it feel that, if I was skilled at doing that, I could make any place feel that way. So not falling for the top level stuff. And yeah, I think that was a very good comment about storage, because there is never enough storage ever.
Yeah. It actually reminded me of a film. I don't know. I think it was either Amy Adams or Isla Fisher, one of those two women that look exactly the same. And there's a film where it's a rom-com, and her job is to stage houses to make them look good for like rich people's apartments. And then she goes to Ireland and falls in love. It's got really nothing to do with it, but that's the beginning of the film. That's her job, that she stages apartments. And I was like, is this a real thing? But I guess it is. People pay people to make their houses look good when they sell them.
Yeah, it does make sense. But yeah, I guess the more they've paid to stage it. Also, I suppose you may have very, very eclectic tastes. So someone may have told you to dull it down a little bit and make it more neutral, which I think is different than having something fully staged, because either all your stuff was rubbish or the place was terrible.
I was gonna say, I think about if whenever my parents have to sell their house and my old childhood bedroom, which is like bright yellow and blue, I'm like, people are gonna view that. Like, this is horrible. Maybe they should paint it. But those are the colours I chose as a kid.
There's so much to consider. And actually, I think the main takeaways from that were to be a little bit more pushy, to ask the uncomfortable questions if you feel uncomfortable, to be nosy, to feel like it's very English to be uncomfortable about going into someone's house and opening their cupboards and running their taps and things. But if you are going to invest the most money of it's the biggest investment of your life, it is worth taking the risk to be a little pushy, to get on with it. Or send someone else to do it. Yeah.
You've been listening to Make Your Move, the podcast here to make moving simple. We hope you found this episode useful, but as always, everyone's situations are different, so make sure to do your own research before making your move. Make Your Move is brought to you by Really Moving, the price comparison site for moving home services. If you have any experiences or questions you'd like to share or ask that might be put on a later episode, please email us at podcast@reallymoving.com. See you on the next episode.